You have an inner signal that's been trying to talk to you your whole life. The problem is half of the time it is wisdom guiding you home. The other half is anxiety trying to wreck your life. And they sound almost identical. And today we are learning the difference because acting on the wrong one has caused more relationships, more careers, and more peace than almost anything that I know. Welcome to the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. What's up, my friend? Welcome back to episode 66 of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. And as a reminder, if you're not already, please make sure to follow me on Substack at Shola Richards. That's substack.com. And if you're enjoying this podcast, the best way to support this work is to leave a rating and review. It only takes a minute or two. Both are deeply appreciated. I want to start today's episode with a story about a decision that I almost made that would have wrecked my life. I'm serious. So about a decade ago, I had a relatively quiet inner voice that started getting loud, telling me that going all in on becoming a professional speaker was a terrible idea. This inner voice was telling me that I didn't really belong on stages. The people who were applauding me were just being polite. And if I tried to go after my dream, the whole thing was going to come crashing down on me. This voice was so persistent, so present, so detailed in its accusations that I started thinking it was telling me the truth. I started to seriously consider walking away from the idea of speaking altogether. Now, here's the important part of the story. Looking back on it, that voice was not my intuition. That voice was anxiety doing the most convincing impression of intuition that anxiety has ever done in the history of my life. And if I had acted on it, I would have walked away from work that has gone to help thousands of people all over the world. Work that I love, work that I was, in fact, called to do. The anxiety had a very specific agenda, which was to keep me safe by making me small. And it figured out the most efficient way to do that was to dress up in intuition's clothes and tell me to quit before I even began. Y'all, I think about that moment all the time. And I think about how many people I've met since then who also could now tell the difference between intuition and anxiety. People who left marriages that they should have stayed in, or people who stayed in marriages that they should have left. People who quit jobs they were thriving in, and people who clung to jobs that were killing them. And in every case, when those people sat down and traced the decision back, the same question always came up. Was that anxiety? Or was that intuition? And almost every time the person didn't have the tools to answer that question. So today, we're going to fix that because the difference between anxiety and intuition might be the most important inner life distinction you ever learn to make. Get it wrong, and you're going to spend years undoing decisions that you should not have made. Get it right, and you start being able to trust yourself in a way that most people never get to experience. You know how we roll in this podcast, fam. 3 parts, 3 strategies, and a kinder world will be waiting on the other side. Let's do this. Let me start with something that's going to sound a little woo-woo at first, but it's actually backed up by some really compelling research. The difference between anxiety and intuition is not primarily a thinking distinction, it's a body distinction. Your body, if you know how to listen to it, can tell you the difference long before your conscious mind can. Dr. Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist at the University of Southern California out here in Los Angeles, has spent decades studying how emotion and decision-making interact. In his foundational work, including the widely cited book, The Descartes Error, Damasio developed what he calls the somatic marker hypothesis, the idea that the body generates physical, embodied signals that guide our decision-making before our conscious mind has finished processing the situation. It's like your body's accumulated wisdom from every experience that you have ever had, communicating with you in a language that lives below the level of words. This is so powerful, but here's the catch. Both anxiety and intuition use that same channel. Both of them show up in your body before they show up in your thoughts, and both of them try to give you information through sensation. And that's why people get them confused all the time because the medium is pretty much the same. So, in my experience, the difference is the texture of the sensation, the urgency that it carries, and the story it generates after it arrives. So, let me set the science aside for a moment and describe what each one actually feels like to me in my body, and maybe you can relate to the difference. So, anxiety in my body usually feels like a spinning top. It's fast, it's loud, it's high in the chest and in the throat, and it usually comes with an urgency that says, if you do not figure this out right now, something terrible is going to happen. Anxiety generates this narrative loop in my head, a story that just keeps replaying over and over again and getting more dramatic, searching nonstop for evidence to confirm itself. Anxiety's playbook is super predictable. It wants me to scroll, to text someone, to make a phone call, to do something, anything to make the sensation stop. Can you relate? On the other hand, intuition in my body almost feels the opposite. Intuition is quiet and chill. It's low in my body, usually in the gut or somewhere in the chest, but lower than where anxiety lives. The biggest difference from the feeling of anxiety is that it comes without urgency. It tends to show up once, deliver its message clearly, and then it becomes still. Intuition, unlike anxiety, doesn't generate an annoying narrative loop. It gives me a sentence, sometimes two, then it goes quiet. Intuition does not demand that I need to do anything in the next 10 minutes. It just gives me the information and then trusts me to do something with it when I'm ready. Let me give you a personal example that you might be able to relate to. Way back in the mid-2000s, I was deciding whether to take a new job. Even though this particular job offer was far from ideal, I was out of work for a while, money was starting to get a little tight, and even though I didn't realize it at the time, those facts were messing with my decision-making ability. The anxious voice in my head was saying, look man, if you don't take this job, you are going to regret it forever. What if another job doesn't come around again? You have to decide tonight. You cannot mess this up. Y'all, that voice was loud, fast, and demanded immediate action. The intuition voice, when I got quiet enough to hear it, said something else entirely. It said in a much calmer tone, this is not the right job for you. That was it. One sentence. No urgency, no loop, just a clear, settled knowing. Unfortunately, I went with the advice from anxiety's voice and accepted the job within 24 hours. And unsurprisingly, it did not take me long to realize that the job was way worse than anything I could have ever anticipated. And in less than a week there, I quit. Yes, the anxiety had been louder, but the intuition had been right all along. And I want to add one piece of nuance here because I had to learn this one the hard way. People who have lived through trauma or have possibly lived in chronically unsafe environments often have a much harder time distinguishing between anxiety and intuition because their nervous systems have been trained to treat anxiety as protective. If that is you, please be gentle with yourself during this work. Distinguishing between anxiety and intuition is a practice and it gets sharper over time. But the first dozen times you try it, you might generally struggle to tell the difference, and that is okay. Keep practicing. The signal will get clearer the more you listen for it. So here is the first kind of strategy of this episode. I want you to do the body signal check. So here's how this works. The next time you're facing a decision and you feel an inner signal pushing you one way or the other, before you act on it, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions in this exact order. First, where is the signal in my body? Is it high in my chest and my throat, or is it lower in the gut? Second, what is the urgency level? Is it screaming at me to act now, or is it calmly delivering information that I can sit with? And third, is there a story attached or just a knowing? In my personal experience, if a narrative loop is playing in my head, defending the signal, arguing for it, building evidence, that is usually my anxiety talking. However, if there's just a quiet, settled sentence with no story attached, that is likely my intuition. Run that 3-question check before you act on any major inner signal for the next 30 days. The goal is to actually find the intuitive voice that's in your gut underneath all of the noise. Even if you do the body signal check, you're going to have moments where the signal is mixed, where the chest and the gut are both buzzing, where the urgency is moderate, where you can't quite tell which voice is doing the talking. That is totally normal, by the way. Anxiety and intuition can overlap, especially in high-stake decisions where both are reasonably present. So we need a second tool, one that does not depend on a single moment, but a pattern across time. Here is a pattern supported by research that almost always gives anxiety away, and it has been crazy accurate for me. Anxiety repeats. It tells you the same kind of thing in every situation, regardless of whether the situation actually warrants it or not. Anxiety has a very small library of stories, and it cycles through them on endless loop. For example, you're not good enough, or this is going to fall apart, or they're going to abandon you, or you don't deserve this, or something terrible is about to happen. If you trace your inner signals across years, you'll find that anxiety's voice has been telling you the same handful of sorry stories for most of your life, for most of the major decisions in your life. Sure, the context may have changed, but the voice did not. Intuition, by contrast, almost never repeats. Unlike anxiety, intuition is context specific. It shows up in one situation with one piece of information, and then it goes away. It doesn't have a library of go-to stories. It doesn't loop. It delivers its sentence, and then it stops talking. And when you look back over your life and trace the moments when intuition was right, you'll notice that each moment was different. Each piece of guidance was specific to that situation. Nothing was on repeat. Let me share a common story of how this could play out. So let's all imagine a guy named Daniel, okay? So Daniel had for years an inner voice that told him that every romantic relationship was about to end badly. In every relationship he's ever been in, the voice eventually showed up and said the same thing. She's gonna leave you, just like the last one. Get out before she does. Daniel had treated this voice as intuition for most of his adult life. He walked away from 3 good women because of it. When Daniel finally sat down with a therapist and started tracing back the voice across years, he saw something that he'd been blind to. The voice was saying the exact same thing in every relationship, regardless of the actual woman, the actual relationship, or the actual evidence. The voice was not intuition. It was anxiety masquerading as wisdom, running a single script on a loop over and over and over again. Daniel had been making major life decisions off a recording that had nothing to do with the people he was actually with. Family, can you relate to the story in some way? So I want to highlight something about this story because I think it's really important. Anxiety almost always has a backstory. The looping voice is usually a leftover survival adaptation from a much earlier chapter in your life. In this very common story, the voice that kept telling Daniel his partner was going to leave him was almost certainly installed in Daniel's nervous system long before he ever even met those 3 women. It probably had origins in a much earlier loss, abandonment, or a terrible relationship that happened previously. The voice was at one point trying to protect him. The tragedy was that the voice never updated when the threat was no longer there. Almost every anxiety loop you have is, at its origin, a protective adaptation that has outlived its usefulness. Recognizing the loop is the first step in retiring the adaptation. So here is the second kindness strategy of this episode. I want you to do what I call the pattern test. Here's how this works. The next time you have an inner signal that you're not sure about, ask yourself one question. Have I heard this voice say this exact thing before in other situations? If the answer is yes, that is the same story this voice has been telling you across multiple chapters of your life, it is probably anxiety. And as mentioned earlier, anxiety loves to repeat itself. The script is a pretty solid giveaway. If the answer is no, if this is a context-specific piece of information that does not feel like part of a familiar loop, then it's most likely to be intuition. And I want you to start keeping a small inner signals journal to keep track of this. Every single time a strong inner signal shows up, write down 3 things. 1, what the signal said. 2, what situation triggered it. And 3, what you ultimately did. If you're able to keep this up for a few months, by the end, you'll have excellent data on yourself. You'll be able to see in your own handwriting which voice has been telling you the same thing for years and which voice has been quiet, specific, and most importantly, accurate. You cannot make this distinction in a single moment, but you can make this distinction when you see a very clear pattern. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Here's something that I want you to think about. Most of the wrong decisions that we make in life are not because we didn't have access to good information. They're because we could not stand the discomfort of sitting with the inner signal long enough to figure out what it actually was. Anxiety has a particular trait, which is impatience. It tells you that you have to decide now, act now, fix it now. And that impatience is precisely what robs us of the time we need to tell the difference between anxiety and intuition. Because here's what I've come to believe after years of watching this in my own life and in the lives of people I love. Intuition does not require speed. Intuition is cool with waiting. The signal that demands instant action is almost never the signal that you're usually listening to. I've got to say this with my full chest. The signal that demands instant action is almost never the signal that you should be trusting. Let me give you an example that's the opposite of my anxiety story in part 1 of this episode. So, a couple of years ago, I was sitting on a decision about whether to take on a big new project. The anxiety in my chest was screaming, you have to say yes today, or they're going to give it to someone else, or you'll look ungrateful, or it'll never come back around and you'll be screwed. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to send the email accepting the work. Instead, I forced myself to wait 72 hours, just 3 days. By day 2, the anxiety had quieted enough that I could hear something else underneath it. A calmer voice, a different voice, and that voice said very simply, this is not the type of work you need to do right now. I did not take the project. Looking back, after watching someone else take on that project and watching her life tumble into a perpetual hellscape because of it, I am profoundly thankful that I avoided that outcome. The intuition had been waiting calmly under the anxiety the entire time, but I needed the anxiety to burn itself out before I could actually hear it. This is what I think is one of the most under-practiced skills in the modern world. The ability to chill the F out, sit with the inner signal without acting on it, and long enough to let the static settle and the truth emerge. We're so trained for speed. Reply to the email, make the call, post a response, decide right now that we have lost touch with the calmer ways of knowing that only show up when we slow down. So here's a third kind of strategy of this episode. I want you to do what I call the slow knowing practice. Here's how this works. The next time you have a strong inner signal pushing you towards a non-emergency decision, something that is not actually life or death in the next 72 hours, I want you to make a commitment to yourself before you act. The commitment is very simple. It's just this. I am not going to act on the signal for at least 72 hours. Obviously, please use your best judgment. If you literally cannot wait for 72 hours for whatever reason, then try 48 hours or even 24 hours. The key is to create some space so you're not acting immediately. If you were able to do the full 72 hours, here are the 3 things that I want you to try to do during that time. First, you sit with the discomfort of not acting. This will be uncomfortable, especially if the signal is anxiety. Anxiety will escalate when you do not give it what it wants. That's cool because you're prepared for it now. The escalation of the discomfort is valuable data. It's telling you the kind of signal that it actually is. Second, you keep doing you. In other words, you keep living your normal life. You go to work, you make dinner, you walk the dog, you go to sleep. You do not turn the decision into the only thing you think about for 72 hours. You let your life keep happening around the decision. And third, you check in once a day, briefly, to notice what the signal is doing. Is it getting louder? Is it getting quieter? Is it changing a story? Is it staying the same? Is a different voice starting to emerge underneath the first one? At the end of 72 hours, you decide. And here's where you're going to notice. You're going to notice almost every single time the signal that is still there, calm, clear, unchanged, that's intuition. The signal that's either escalated into chaos or burned itself out into nothing is anxiety. The waiting is what reveals the difference. Speed buries it, and slowness usually uncovers it. One important caveat that I hinted at earlier, but I want to say clearly. The slow knowing practice is not for emergencies. If you're in a situation involving immediate physical safety, a child in danger, a medical emergency, trust the urgent signal and act. The practice is for the much more common situations where urgency is in your head being generated by anxiety, not by the actual circumstances of your life. Most of the decisions that we make in panic mode are not actually emergencies. They just feel like emergencies because the anxiety told us that they were. Here is the kindness connection that I do not want us to miss. Most of the unkindness that I've committed in my life, the snapped responses, the sharp emails, the conversations that I wish I could take back, came from decisions I made under the spell of an anxiety voice that I thought was telling me the truth. Slow knowing is not just a tool for big life decisions, it's a tool for the small daily decisions that determine in one way or another what kind of human you actually are. The person who waits a beat before reacting is typically more likely to respond with kindness, not because they care more, because they've given themselves the time to hear the wiser voice underneath the louder one. All right, my friend, let's bring this all together. Today, we tackle one of the most important inner life distinctions you will ever learn how to make, the difference between anxiety and intuition. Get it right, and you start being able to trust yourself in a way that most people never get to experience. In part 1, we built the body signal check, a 3-question diagnostic about where the signal lives, how urgent it feels, and whether it comes attached to a narrative loop or a simple, quiet knowing. In part 2, we built the pattern test, tracing the voice across multiple situations to see whether it's the same script running on a loop, which is anxiety signature, or speaking in specific context-bound ways, which is intuition signature. And in part 3, we built the slow knowing practice, a 72-hour commitment to not act on a non-emergency signal so that the static can settle and the truth can emerge from underneath the noise. So allow me to close with this. Your intuition has been trying to guide you home your entire life. The reason you have not trusted it is because you have not had the tools to distinguish its voice from the part of you that is scared, hypervigilant, and trying to keep you small. Both voices live in you. Both voices are part of being human. The work is not to silence the anxious voice. The work is to recognize when it is talking so you can hear the other voice underneath, the one that's been waiting patiently for you to learn how to listen. Slow down, sit with the signal, run the checks, and trust the quiet, calm, settled voice that emerges after the static clears is one that has been on your side from the very beginning. And here is the gift of doing this work, family. Once you start being able to tell those two voices apart, you stop being run by the loud one. You stop reacting to phony emergencies. You stop making decisions designed to soothe an old fear instead of advance your actual life. You become slowly the kind of person who can sit in a hard moment and wait for the truth to arrive and then act on it from a settled place instead of a panicked one. That kind of person is rare, and that kind of person is the kind of person that we need more of in this world. Family, this is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I have one favor to ask of you. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Bye for now.